a little background first, if it's possible. Can you tell us and our audience what your relationship to Louise Bourgeois was, what role you play today in regards to her studio and archive?
So I met Louise in 1980 when I had just finished graduate school and started to organize a few exhibitions, and I included her work in one of those exhibitions, and that's how I met her, through the organization of that show in 1980. And we slowly became friends, and she invited me to the house and we started hanging out, and I started working with her part-time on various projects and all that, and I eventually started working full-time with her, and so I pretty much worked with her from 1980 till she passed away in 2010. I'm currently head of the foundation now, which sort of administers her legacy. It's based in New York in her townhouse where she lived since the 60s.
And is that right, Jerry, that when you met Louise for the first time, you were seated into the gallery in Soho you were working at, and you were thinking of showing a work of Louise Bourgeois into your first exhibition, and she entered the gallery at the same time?
You know, I sort of, I had seen a few pieces underground, but that was really the first time that I actually, sort of met her. And she came in, I had her piece installed, and she started screaming that she wanted to remove her piece out of the gallery. She didn't like the way it was installed. And I was sort of shocked because, this ferocious scream of this little lady, and I thought she would have been happy to be included because to be honest, the artists in the show were actually at the time more famous than she was. So, and she had not been showing. So, but then we sort of, and I understood what she was complaining about. She wasn't totally off base, to be honest, but it was a gallery situation, and I had to deal with the artists that belonged to the gallery. Louise did not belong to the gallery, so there was different sets of priorities. But then we went and had a cup of tea, and she calmed down, and we talked, and that was sort of the beginning of a friendship, really.
And immediately after that, you had the chance to work with her?
Well, then she invited, after the show, which we were able to sell the piece to a museum, so she was also quite shocked that we were able to sell her work, because she had not been, really didn't have a market at all. I mean, she had an underground reputation. Then she invited me to the house, which was sort of an amazing sort of house, it's just, the way Louise lived and the way what she produced, and everything was a piece of the same pie. And I was sort of mesmerized by her, and she took me through the house and she showed me her drawings. And through that process, I was able to do a show of just her drawings and early paintings. And from there began the friendship, and we just started hanging out. I mean, Louise always liked young people. Louise did not hang out with people her own age, so it was great.
It was the great match.
Yeah.
Excellent. Perfect. Please, Osher.
I mean, maybe that brings a little bit onto the cause and the revenue that we're generating from this collection, which will be go towards supporting Skateistan, this internationally acclaimed NGO, empowering and educating children through skateboarding. Is there something that resonates with you personally about this mission, this collaborative cause, or how do you think Louise would respond to this collaboration?
I think, Louise liked, as I said, Louise liked young people. And I think she remained a child her whole life. I mean, if you look at Louise's work, it's really told through the eyes of a child, with all its traumas, with all its fears and anxieties. But it is rooted really at that moment, when she was a teenager. That's the moment where there's a transition, not physically, but a transition, in terms of growing up and seeing the world and trying to establish your identity, to find a place. I think all these things, the idea, I would think, like the skateboard is almost like a little kid having a tricycle. It gives you a sense of freedom. You're in control. It's your life. You're the master of this little skateboard. You're going out. You're hanging with other people. It's a sign of independence. I think these are all things that Louise would have seen and, and really believed in. I mean, this, as I said, the transition in life for a young girl to an adult, I mean, that's a perilous moment. Lots of things can go wrong. And, Louise always considered herself like a runaway girl, that she ran away from France and she made it. But not all runaway girls make it in a strange way. So I think, life is, There's certain things that's fate, certain things that are luck, but it's also, you have to take the matter in your own hands and forge your own identity. And I think, you know, I think that's what I see this project in this way of like, this is a certain moment in someone's life, and it's representative of this change, of this idea of wanting to have control.
And I definitely underline what you were saying, Jerry, considering Louise's work and her state of being a young child, little girl. It's true that the majority of the social projects we are supporting, and especially Skateistan in Afghanistan, is definitely linked to the cause mainly of girls, because the girls, 80% of the kids in Skateistan in Afghanistan are girls. Them not being able to make any other sports, the Taliban didn't know about the skate. It gave them truly an opportunity by the time. So it's interesting to make the link of Louise's work and thoughts considering the young ladies and the mission of Skateistan. So Oshik was a right match to support, of course, Skateistan and projects empowering the young girls.
Yeah, I mean, I think the match is perfect, and the story is sort of writing itself here. And I think, you know, also as you were saying, Charles, about the adversity and the struggle that particularly the participants of Skateistan's projects go through, I think that as well makes a link to Bourgeois' work. And so I'm interested, maybe Jerry, you can speak about the themes of struggle and how those appeared in Louise's work, and what you think is like most important for us to understand about adversity in relation to her art.
Well, I think if you look at her biography, I mean, she grew up in a family of tapestry restorers, and her mother was quite ill, and Louise took care of the mother. The father was sort of the macho dominant person, and I think he had his ideas of what the kind of life he wanted Louise to live. And I think there was a struggle for Louise, and, you know, her father did not want her to go to art school. He thought artists were like, you know, not high on the food chain. You know, he wanted her to continue this practice of the tapestry business. And Louise was very intelligent. She studied mathematics. She was really very bright. And her mother wanted her to do other things, you know, but the father was sort of wanted her to basically get married, continue the business. And that's not the life Louise wanted. And so, you know, there was a struggle. It's not to say, I mean, you know, she really loved her father, but he was very controlling with the money, very controlling, you know, in so many. So when she met an American who happened to be in Paris, it was sort of, you know, she married him and she left. You know, that's why she said she was a runaway. This was an opportunity for her to sort of forge the life that she wanted. Not to say when she came here, she got, you know, she was sort of shocked, I think, and, you know, she was lonely. There was sort of, you know, she felt slightly isolated, but it was a big risk in a way to make a break from what really her father had planned out for her.
When she had begun her psychotherapy, because I think it was very constructive as her personality.
Yeah, well, so she, you know, she was born in 1911.
Yeah.
Her mother dies in 1932. That was like the first big trauma in her life. Her father dies. Okay, she marries an American in 1938, and she moves to New York in 38. She had 2 painting shows, and she had 3 shows of sculpture, basically. But she began her psychoanalysis in 1951. Precipitated, it seems like the death of her father was the thing that sort of pushed her over. But, you know, she was also, you know, she had anxiety. You know, she was a very anxious, sensitive person to begin with. I mean, we have her diaries when she was a young girl from 12 years old, and she talks about her anxiety, about the problems and all that. So she was very sensitive and very fragile. I think the move here, she needed to make that move, but there were things, you know, that were quite difficult for her to adjust being here, because quickly she had 3 sons and she was trying to be a good husband. She's trying to have a career. There's lots of things, and they were all sort of in conflict. And I think she was trying to figure out, you know,
Her husband,
and she had a breakdown. She basically had a breakdown, and
yes.
So she really had to. really get to understand what was going on. I mean, as much as she was getting help and she did that, but she was also trying to understand herself through her work, but also she was reading a lot on other psychoanalysts, you know, other Freudian psychoanalysts. I mean, Louise was very educated. She's very intellectual, very well read, but she definitely had emotional issues at the same time that were overpowering.
And her husband was very supportive, relating to her state and relating to her work.
Yeah, he was very much in love with her. He was trying to help her as best he could. But yeah, no, he was very supportive.
Okay.
I mean, he was an art historian, quite well-known art historian in the day. And he believed in her as an artist, and I think that was really one of the important things in a way, is that he really believed that, you know, that she should make her art, you know, and that would, you know, and that's what the therapy actually, that the more, when she made art, that's when she was the happiest. So in a way, it's what he sort of wanted, and what really the therapy, you know, she came to realize that if she was working, she was expressing herself, whether she was expressing her unconscious or not, but those were the happy moments in life. And when Louise was not working, and I could attest to that, that's where the trouble came in, and the anxiety came in, and the self-destructive impulses came in.
Thank you for this, Jerry.
And you know, she was expressing herself in so many different, well, she was a big mixed media artist, and you mentioned sculpture, you mentioned drawing, and obviously her skills as a seamstress as well. Here, with this collaboration together, we're really using skateboards as a canvas. And the interesting thing about skateboards is that they, in order for them to be used creatively for their purpose, you know, they must be destroyed. They kind of have that double or paradoxical relationship with destruction and creativity. How did you yourself feel upon you know, seeing these additions that we've created together, and what's your take on the skateboard itself as a medium with Luigi's other work in mind?
You know, Louise didn't privilege any medium. You know, the medium is just there for you to use, and each medium has certain potential, there's certain things you can do. But I think, you know, Louise believed, like, in life, you have to figure out what makes you happy. Louise believed everyone should be psychoanalyzed, and everyone needs to have the self-knowledge of what they are and why they are the way they are and what do they want to change. And Louise did believe in the power of change, that you could really pull yourself up when you're depressed. You know, she said, "Oh, it's the view from the bottom of the well." You got to pick yourself up and sort of get back on an even keel. But you know, she always believed that everyone has to figure out an activity. You have to understand what that activity is. You know, Louise believed in sublimation. Louise believed in acting out like you do an activity. If you have a problem, you know, if you're nervous, you may want to wash the dishes. So it gives you great pleasure. You're washing the dishes, but you're still dealing with anxiety. So you're acting out and you're doing another activity. So maybe for people on a skateboard, it gives them, as I said, this freedom, it's a certain power. They're learning a certain skill, and it's pleasure. It has to be the pleasure principle is connected with acting out. So you have to gravitate to something that gives you pleasure. So I think, you know, the skateboard is just another form of, you know, could be another form of acting out. You know, not everything has to have a deep psychological meaning, but I think for a lot of kids, I think it is. It's an activity that gives them, as I said at the beginning, like a certain sense of freedom. There's a sense of mastery, a sense of skill. Of going with their friends, getting away from their parents and doing something. And, you know, it's learning to be on your own and to take charge of your destiny in a way.
Listening to what you're saying, Jerry, I think the most important thing for us to do is to send very quickly a set of each deck in different places around the world in social projects and see the girls skating the decks. Please, just make sure we are sending ASAP some decks.
100%. We'll get those editions actually destroyed through the creativity of these young.
Voila.
Yeah, amazing. And for you, you know, the collection is comprised of 4 key bourgeois works. We've got Feminism, Eau de Mémoire, Extreme Tension, Les Fleurs, each of which will be released in a limited run of 100 editions. We'd love to know which edition you resonate with most deeply and why. And if you have any personal stories to go along with that connection, that would be amazing to hear.
Well, I like them. You know, they're all different. I mean, that's the thing about Louise's work. I mean, I think they're all, to me, very successful. I think I like, there's something very in the simplicity of the hands, the extreme tension.
Yeah.
And I think because, you know, Louise believed, you know, that's the other thing about skateboarding. I'm just thinking about this now, but, you know, Louise liked sculpture because it involved the body. And, you know, she said sculpture has to involve the body. And she said, you know, like the spider, you know, the spider builds its web out of its own body. There's something about the influence of the body and in the way that, you know, psychic states are represented through the body and emotions are. So there's something about those hands, you know, it comes from a series called Extreme Tension, which is in Sandra Pompidou's collection. And it's just something about those hands that, you know, really it invokes this sense of tension in a way. I mean, it's slightly ambivalent, but I mean, I know the whole series, so I'm seeing that in that. But I think there's something very, you know, it's just reduced to its essence in a way that you just see these hands going up and the position of the hands and the very long arms. I think it's a very powerful, simple, beautiful image.
Yeah.
Almost all the people we've been sharing the collection with has said the same thing with you. So I think we'll sell very quickly the hands one.
Oh, that's good.
I'll make sure to send one to you, Jerry, for the
Okay.
office
That'd be
before
nice. Thank
studying
you.
those.
Yeah, it was I think it's amazing to see, as you say, all her work is so kind of different and unique, and well, when you look back through her work in history, even though I know that a lot of it was unseen for a long time, you know, she lived a century, and we can definitely say that her work has made her a artist who is ever responding to the challenges of her time and remaining kind of perpetually poignant and insightful throughout her life. I mean, you know better than anyone, I'm sure, about this, but maybe you can share with us what you think is a key lesson we can learn from the life and work of Louise Bourgeois. I'm sure there are many that you have in mind and have taken on board yourself, but, you know, seeing an artist who remains exciting and challenging and deeply beautiful throughout her career, we'd love to know if there's a lesson from that and how we might be able to apply it to our own lives moving forward.
You know, I think I think Louise told the story of her life. And she always said, if you tell the story of your life and you tell it truthfully, you're going to be interesting. You know, if you tell someone else's story, it's not very interesting. But I think, you know, life is full of problems, and you really have to, you really have to understand yourself. And I think that I would say the key thing is, you know, for Louise, I mean, Louise on one hand was a very anxious person and fearful, but she tried to conquer that, because anxiety stops you from fulfilling what you want. It stops you. It's limiting. And the idea is to, you know, to go, as she said, from being passive to active. So you could take life in your own hands. You're not afraid to do the things you want to do. And you can't be afraid, you know, you have to say what you feel. You don't have to be embarrassed. You don't have to be afraid. It's really important that you're true to yourself in a way. I think, you know, Louise said self-expression is sacred and fatal. You know, it's great, you can do it, but you got to be careful too. I mean, we live in particularly in this day and age, I think, you know, it's a very strange moment in a way. But I think the lesson would be is to figure out what turns you on and don't be afraid to go for it.
It's very funny listening again, Jerry, what you're saying, because it's very similar from the skate. Everything that the skate is giving to the kids is who you are, try to find it, continue, you have good people surrounding you, the community, etc. I would love to see images of those girls sharing some images skating with the decks, and then just simply giving a word of what it has supported them, gave them, etc. Because it's definitely the link we could do with Louise' philosophy, should I say.
100%. 100%.
We'll make sure to have some great images to share with you, Jerry, with this, but give us a few weeks for this. And before that, I will come to New York to visit you, and maybe we have the chance to make a bit of skate together. We never know.
That sounds good. I'd like that.
And how is the show doing in London? I'm hearing that it's
Amazing.
massively successful.
You really have to see it before it closes. I really recommend. You're so close. You really should go to London and see the show at the Hayward and the other show at the Kunstmuseum Basel.
Yeah.
That Jenny Holzer curated. There are two shows, very different shows, both remarkable, both I think really beautiful, intelligent.
And when is finishing the show in London?
Middle of May 15th.
I will definitely go, I promise, and I'm heading to Basel next week, so I will go to see the show definitely.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I was actually lucky enough to be able to see the Hayward show last week when I was in London, which is where I'm from originally, and it was really fabulous. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, you'll see Extreme Tension is in the Basel show. You'll see the whole suite of Extreme Tension. It's in Basel.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I will take images and send it to you, but I guess you've been to visit the show, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was there installing. I was there, yeah, no. But I was happy with the London show. I think it looks really great in this space, in the Hayward.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. It really works. The brutalism of the building with Louise's work as well, I think, is a really, really lovely juxtaposition.
We'll try to make the best work we can do with the editing of this. Jerry, thank you very much for your time. I'm connecting once in town, and we'll make sure to give you something great with the interview.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jerry.